It's every parent's worst nightmare. Your child goes missing, and no matter how hard you search, no matter how many years go by, you're left with nothing but unanswered questions. For some, the search for the truth never ends. They hold on to the hope that one day, they'll get the answers they so desperately need. But for others, the discovery comes when they least expect it, in a way that will send chills down your spine. Imagine this. You're just going about your daily routine, living your life, when suddenly everything changes. You walk into a laundromat, minding your business, maybe exchanging a few pleasantries with the person at the counter, when you freeze. Your heart skips a beat. Your mind races, struggling to process what's happening in that moment. And there, staring you back in the eyes, is the face of someone you've been searching for, someone who's been missing for years. This is exactly what happened to one mother, a story that still haunts her to this day. It was prom night when her daughter, a bright, outgoing teenager full of promise and dreams, vanished without a trace. No clues. No notes. Nothing. It was as if she had disappeared into thin air, leaving behind nothing but a wrecked family and a town paralyzed with fear and confusion. It was the kind of case that would linger in the minds of everyone who followed it. How could a teenager just vanish? How could someone so full of life, with so much ahead of her, simply disappear? The local authorities combed through every lead, followed every tip, but nothing ever came up. It was a story that consumed the small town for years. No one had answers, and everyone had questions. Then, years later, something extraordinary happened. In a moment that seemed so ordinary, yet was anything but, the mother, exhausted by years of searching, walked into a laundromat one afternoon. She didn't know it then, but in that single moment, her life was about to change forever. She stepped into the laundromat, casually dropping off a load of laundry, when she looked up and saw a woman standing near the washing machines. Her gaze locked on her. The woman was staring at her too, almost as if she was waiting for her. And as the seconds ticked by, the blood in the mother's veins ran cold. The face in front of her was so familiar. It was her daughter's face, but something was different. Something about her eyes, something that left the mother paralyzed, unable to move. Could it really be her? After all these years, could this be the moment she had been waiting for? You might be thinking, what is going on? How could this even happen? Trust me, I get it. You came here looking for answers, and I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll understand what happened. You'll know why this encounter in that laundromat has become one of the most chilling moments in this mother's life. I know you're already on the edge of your seat, wondering what happens next. Well, I'm here to tell you that this story isn't what it seems. There are twists and turns, mysteries to uncover, and dark secrets that no one saw coming. But before we go any further, let's take a moment to connect. We've all experienced a moment in life where we felt a sense of déjà vu, where something suddenly felt too familiar, and we couldn't explain why. Maybe it was a stranger's face that made you do a double take, or maybe it was the sudden rush of emotion when you walked into a place that held a special memory. We all have those moments, and that's what makes this story so real and relatable. The mother's instinct told her something was wrong, but there was still that part of her that hoped, against all odds, that her daughter was out there somewhere, alive, and that this moment in the laundromat was just the beginning of a miraculous reunion. I want you to put yourself in her shoes for a second. Imagine being the mother, waking up every day for years, wondering where your child is, what happened to her, and why no one could find any answers. The pain of not knowing, of not being able to have closure, must be unbearable. And yet, here she was, standing face to face with a woman who looked so much like the daughter she had lost. It's a moment that will make you question everything you thought you knew about the case. But hold on a second, because just when you think the mystery is about to be solved, we find ourselves standing at a crossroads. What if I told you that the woman in the laundromat wasn't exactly who she seemed to be? What if the woman standing before her was carrying a secret that no one could have ever predicted? I know you've been wondering, what's the connection between this woman and the missing teen? How is it possible that after all these years, a chance encounter in a laundromat could unlock a chain of events so twisted that it would send ripples through the community? Well, this is where things take a dark turn, and the truth begins to unravel in ways that will leave you questioning everything. But I won't spoil everything just yet. I need you to stay with me, because the answers you're searching for are just around the corner. We're about to dive into the details of what happened next. You're going to hear the chilling moments that followed, the investigation that took unexpected twists, and the heart-wrenching truth that no one could have predicted. Before we get into all that, take a second to imagine something. Close your eyes and picture that laundromat, the hum of the dryers, the clink of coins falling into the machines, the scent of detergent in the air. Now picture yourself standing there, just like the mother, and feeling that gut-wrenching sense of familiarity that you can't explain. The truth is, there's something about this encounter that feels almost like fate, and it's something you're going to have to see for yourself. So, stick around. The story is far from over, and the twists are just beginning. Keep watching because by the end of this video, you'll get the answers you've been craving. And trust me, what happens next will leave you speechless. The clock is ticking, and the truth is about to be revealed. What will happen when the past collides with the present? How will the mother face the truth? And what will this encounter mean for the years of unanswered questions? Stay tuned. You won't want to miss what comes next. As the mother stood frozen in the laundromat, her heart raced, the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest. It felt as though time had stopped altogether. The woman before her didn't just look like her daughter. There was something else. A familiarity in the way she stood, the subtle curve of her smile, the way she tilted her head when she spoke. But it was more than just physical resemblance. There was a strange, almost unsettling energy in the air, a current of tension that both of them seemed to sense, but neither could explain. For a moment, the mother struggled to find the words. She wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but the words caught in her throat. Was this a cruel trick? Was it really her daughter standing there? Or was it someone who just looked so much like her that it triggered a deep, primal reaction? The woman's eyes, however, held something that the mother couldn't place. A story, perhaps, one written across the canvas of time, secrets hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. And that was the moment when the realization hit her. The past had a way of sneaking up when you least expected it, and the answers she had been searching for were never as simple as they seemed. You see, it wasn't just the disappearance that had haunted the mother all these years. It was the unanswered questions, the feelings of helplessness that lingered in the quiet moments, the eerie sense that someone, was watching from the shadows. After her daughter went missing on prom night, the mother's life had been in a constant state of turmoil. She couldn't focus on anything else. Every conversation, every glance, every moment of silence was consumed by the fear that she might never get closure, that she might never know what had really happened to her child. But what the mother didn't know was that as the years passed, her own actions had started to shape the course of events. She had become obsessed with finding the truth. She pored through every lead, contacted every missing persons group, and dug into every bit of information she could find, often staying up late into the night scouring the internet for any clue that could bring her closer to an answer. Her obsession led her to visit places her daughter had once frequented, even retracing her daughter's steps on prom night in the hopes of finding a single clue. The town had started to whisper about her, about the woman who couldn't let go, who seemed to be chasing ghosts. But she didn't care about the whispers. She couldn't stop, not when she felt so close to the truth. As the years dragged on, her relationship with her husband had begun to suffer. He, too, was drowning in the mystery of their daughter's disappearance, but in a different way. He seemed to have retreated into himself, numbing the pain with work and alcohol. Their marriage, once full of love and hope, had become a fragile shell of what it once was. It wasn't just the lack of answers that tore them apart. It was the fact that neither of them could move forward, and in their shared grief, they had drifted further and further apart. The mother's single-minded pursuit of the truth had made her distant, her obsession with the case growing while her family crumbled around her. She found herself alone in the pursuit, and that loneliness only deepened the mystery. But it wasn't just the family that was affected by her relentless search for answers. Over time, strange occurrences began to unfold in the small town.
People started to talk.
A woman in a black coat was seen lurking near the old high school. A car had been spotted parked near the edge of the woods, where no one ever went anymore. The local diner's waitress had heard whispers about a mysterious man who seemed to know a little too much about the case. Each new piece of information seemed to be a puzzle, but none of the pieces ever quite fit. Every time the mother thought she had uncovered something meaningful, the lead would go cold. Was someone trying to mislead her? Was she being played by people she once trusted? One of the most perplexing parts of the case had been the odd behavior of the town sheriff, who had been the one to initially investigate the disappearance. He was an old friend of the family, someone the mother had trusted implicitly. But over time, he began to act strangely whenever she brought up the case. At first, he seemed supportive, offering words of encouragement, trying to help in his own way. But gradually, his responses became more evasive, his once reassuring presence now making the mother uneasy. He'd made promises to follow every lead, but time after time, the mother found herself waiting for answers that never came. Could it be that the sheriff knew more than he was letting on? Had he been hiding something all along? The mother couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about him, but she couldn't figure out what. Then there was the strange, unexplained visit to the old abandoned house on the outskirts of town. The house was long since forgotten, a relic of a bygone era, but it had always intrigued the mother. A few months after her daughter vanished, she had taken a trip out there alone. The house had a haunted feel to it, dark windows, peeling paint, and a sense of stillness that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She had heard rumors that the house had once belonged to a family with dark ties to the area, a family whose son had disappeared under mysterious circumstances years before. The similarities to her daughter's case were eerie. The mother had wondered if there was a connection, but her search there had turned up nothing, just a strange feeling of being watched and an odd sense of déjà vu. Despite the dead ends, the mother kept going. She couldn't stop. The search became a part of her. She was consumed by it. And that was how she found herself walking into the laundromat that fateful afternoon, exhausted and worn down, when she locked eyes with the woman who looked so much like her daughter.
There was no turning back now.
The events that had led her here had already set the stage for the truth to be revealed, but how could she be certain? Was the woman in the laundromat truly her daughter? Or was this just another cruel twist of fate? And then, just as the mother gathered the courage to speak, to confront this woman who seemed to have walked out of the past, something happened, something that would send the mother's world spinning even further out of control. The woman in front of her gave a faint smile, one that felt both comforting and unsettling, and then whispered something so unexpected that it would leave the mother, and you, the viewer, questioning everything you thought you knew about the case.
Stay tuned.
The next part of this story is about to reveal a twist so shocking, you'll be left speechless. The moment the woman in the laundromat spoke, the air around the mother seemed to thicken, as if the very walls of the room were closing in. The words she whispered were simple, yet they had the power to shatter everything the mother thought she knew. You've been looking in the wrong places. Those few words hit the mother, like a punch to the gut. She froze, her mind racing as she tried to process what they meant. What could this woman possibly know about the case? And why now, after all these years? The woman's gaze held steady, almost daring the mother to ask the one question that had been burning in her mind ever since she'd walked through that door. But before the mother could speak, the moment was interrupted. A loud bang sounded from the back of the laundromat, followed by a sudden rush of air. The mother spun around, instinctively taking a step back. Her heart was pounding, her senses heightened. For a brief moment, everything went still. The laundromat was quiet, except for the low hum of the dryers, and then, like a switch being flipped, the sound of footsteps echoed from the back. The woman's expression didn't change, but the tension in the air grew heavier. It was as though someone or something had just cast a shadow over the entire room, and the mother felt a chill creep up her spine. The momentary distraction was enough for the woman to slip away, disappearing into the back of the laundromat, leaving the mother standing there, alone and with more questions than ever. The confusion in the air felt thick, suffocating. What had just happened? Was it intentional? Had the woman planned to disappear? The mother quickly gathered her thoughts and tried to make sense of it all. She wasn't about to let this slip through her fingers. If there was even a chance that this woman held the key to unlocking the mystery, she couldn't let her get away. But when the mother tried to follow, she found herself blocked by something she hadn't anticipated. The laundromat owner, a man she'd known for years, stepped in front of her with an expression that was completely foreign to her. He was always friendly, always chatty, but now there was a coldness in his eyes that unsettled her. "I think you need to leave," he said, his voice low, almost as if he were trying to warn her without drawing attention. "You're not going to find anything here." The words caught the mother off guard, and for the first time in a long time, she felt something other than the thrill of the chase: fear. She stared at him, trying to figure out if there was something more behind his warning. The way he said it, the way his eyes darted to the back of the laundromat, suggested that there was something he wasn't telling her. Could he be involved? Had he been hiding something all along? The mother was no stranger to people trying to throw her off course, but there was something different about this situation. It was like the walls were closing in, and the more she dug, the more resistance she encountered. Someone didn't want her to get the answers. Someone didn't want her to uncover the truth. And it wasn't just the laundromat owner. She began to suspect that there was a whole web of people who had been trying to keep her from finding out what had really happened to her daughter. As if on cue, the phone in her pocket buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a text message from an unknown number, a simple sentence that sent a shiver down her spine. "Stop digging. You're getting too close." The message was cryptic, but the threat was clear. It wasn't just some random person trying to intimidate her. It was someone who knew exactly what she was searching for, and they were trying to scare her into backing off. But the mother wasn't the type to be intimidated. She'd spent years searching for the truth, and nothing would stop her now. Not threats, not warnings, nothing. Still, there was something about this message that made her pause. She'd seen threats before, received anonymous tips, and faced plenty of dead ends. But this felt different. There was a sense of urgency in it, as if someone was desperately trying to prevent her from following a trail that might lead to something far bigger than she could have imagined. The weight of the text lingered in her mind as she tried to figure out who could be behind it. Was it someone from the past? Someone who had been involved in the disappearance? Or someone new who had only recently entered the picture? Her mind kept returning to the woman in the laundromat. Could she be the key to it all? And what was the meaning behind her cryptic words? "You've been looking in the wrong places." It made no sense, but it also made her realize how little she actually knew. Perhaps the clues she'd been following were merely distractions, misdirection placed intentionally in her path to lead her astray. What if the answers had been right in front of her all along? But then, as if fate had other plans, another piece of the puzzle went missing, just when she thought she was getting closer. She received a call from the local police department, the one officer who had been helping her with the investigation for years. But instead of the usual update, the officer's voice was tense, shaky. "I don't know what's going on," he said, his tone low. "But I think we've lost something important. The evidence from the original investigation, it's gone. It's been taken, and I don't know by who." The words hit her like a punch to the stomach. How could this happen? How could a key piece of evidence just vanish into thin air? The officer had no answers, just as she had no answers about what had happened in the laundromat. Was it all connected? The missing evidence, the cryptic warnings, the woman who vanished without a trace? Was someone playing a long game, pulling strings from the shadows, or was there a far darker truth at the heart of this mystery than she could ever have imagined? The pieces were all there, scattered in front of her, but the more she tried to connect them, the more elusive the truth became. It felt like she was racing against time, and with each passing moment, the walls around her seemed to close in tighter. Someone or something was trying to stop her, and they were getting closer. And just when she thought she might be onto something, the phone buzzed again, and this time, the message was even more chilling. "You're not safe anymore."
Stay tuned.
The truth is about to get even darker. The mother's hands trembled as she stared at the new message on her phone. You're not safe anymore. It was like a warning, not just for her, but for anyone who had gotten too close to the truth. Her first instinct was to immediately reach out to the police officer she had been in contact with, but something told her that wouldn't help. Not this time. She didn't know who she could trust anymore. It felt as though the world she had known, the people she had relied on, were slowly being pulled into a web of lies and deception, and she was the only one left trying to piece it all together. But then, in the midst of her spiraling thoughts, something unexpected happened. Something that made the already complicated situation even worse. The phone rang again, and this time it was her husband's number. She hadn't spoken to him much recently, not since the distance between them had grown. Their marriage had been strained, overshadowed by the unresolved disappearance of their daughter, but he was still a part of her life, however fragmented. We need to talk, his voice crackled over the line, sounding more urgent than she'd ever heard him. I just got a strange call. Someone warned me, too. Told me I should stop looking into this. Stop digging into what happened. The words sent a chill down her spine. It wasn't just her. The walls were closing in on him as well. Had he been threatened in the same way? Were they being watched from every angle? The mother's mind raced as she tried to understand why this was happening now, at this moment in time. It felt as though a shadowy figure, or perhaps a group of figures, had been manipulating the events from the very beginning, pulling strings in the background, orchestrating the chaos in ways that were impossible to trace. How could they know so much? How could they have anticipated her every move, every lead, every decision? Her husband's voice on the other end of the line trembled, a sign that his calm exterior was cracking. I don't know who's behind this, but I feel like I'm being watched. I went to the grocery store today, and there was a man. He followed me. I didn't think much of it at first, but when I came out, he was still there, standing across the parking lot, just staring at me. I'm telling you, I don't know if I'm imagining things, but it didn't feel right. I think it's time we both step back, before it's too late. The words felt like a slap in the face. How could he even think about stepping back now when they were so close? She had spent years in a relentless pursuit for answers, and now, just when she was starting to make sense of the puzzle, he wanted to walk away. The frustration boiled within her, but she knew deep down that he was afraid of what they were getting into, afraid of what they might uncover. She had to admit, though, that his fear wasn't entirely unfounded. She felt it too. The closer she got to the truth, the more dangerous everything seemed. It wasn't just a case of a missing person anymore. It was a dangerous game that someone was playing with their lives. As she ended the call, the weight of her husband's fear lingered in her chest. It was hard not to let it affect her, but she couldn't afford to stop now. She couldn't let the shadow of doubt creep in and derail everything she had worked for. No, she had come too far. There was no going back. But just as she started to formulate a plan, a strange thought crossed her mind, a thought that made her question everything she thought she knew. What if her husband wasn't the only one receiving threats? What if the people closest to her were being targeted as well? Her phone buzzed again, interrupting her thoughts. This time, it wasn't a threatening message, it was a video. The file was encrypted, but with the kind of persistence that had driven her this far, she managed to unlock it. The screen flickered to life, showing an unfamiliar, grainy image. At first, she didn't recognize the location. It appeared to be a street corner, shrouded in shadows, the camera angle awkward and shaky as if someone had been trying to hide. But then, her heart skipped a beat as the camera zoomed in on a figure standing at the edge of the street. A figure she knew all too well. It was the sheriff. He was standing under the dim streetlight talking to someone, but the video was too blurry to make out their face. As the sheriff leaned in, the figure in the shadows did something unexpected. They handed him a small envelope, something that appeared to contain papers. The sheriff took it, glanced around to make sure no one was watching, and slipped it into his jacket pocket. The video ended abruptly, and the screen went black. The mother's breath caught in her throat. What was going on? Why was the sheriff meeting with someone in secret? Why hadn't he ever mentioned it? The sheriff had been a trusted ally throughout this whole ordeal. He had been there for them from the beginning, comforting them during the darkest days after their daughter disappeared. Yet, this video painted a very different picture. Could he have been hiding something? Was he part of the cover-up? Or had he been manipulated into something far worse? The questions swirled in her mind, each one leading to another, each one digging deeper into the mystery. She couldn't trust anyone, not even the people who had seemed to be on her side. And if the sheriff was involved, it meant that the conspiracy ran deeper than she could have imagined. It wasn't just a case of a missing person. It was about power, about control, about silencing the truth before it came to light. Someone had been pulling the strings all along, and now the mother was closer than ever to uncovering their identities. But as the tension built, as the pieces of the puzzle seemed to start falling into place, the stakes grew even higher. The phone buzzed again, this time with a message from an unknown number. "You don't know who you're dealing with. Stay away, or you'll regret it."
It was clear now.
The forces behind her daughter's disappearance, the forces that had been shadowing her every move, were trying to intimidate her into stopping, trying to make her back down. But how much further could they go? How much longer would they let her dig before they decided to put an end to it all? The mother took a deep breath, steeling herself for what came next. There was no turning back.
Not now.
Not when she was so close. But as the walls closed in around her, one thing was certain. The deeper she went, the more dangerous it became, and the closer she got to uncovering a truth that would shake her to her very core.
Stay tuned.
The twists are just beginning, and the truth is darker than you could ever imagine. The days following the mysterious video and the unsettling messages blurred into a haze of uncertainty and fear. The mother couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that every step she took was being observed by eyes she couldn't see. The weight of it pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe, making it difficult to think clearly. It was no longer just about finding the truth, it was about survival. Someone, or something, was making it clear that they would stop at nothing to keep her from uncovering what had happened to her daughter. It started with the subtle signs, the odd shadows in the corner of her vision, the unfamiliar cars that seemed to be parked near her house whenever she looked outside, the feeling of being followed as she went about her daily routines. It wasn't enough to prove anything, but it was enough to make her heart race with every glance over her shoulder. It felt like something was closing in, the walls tightening, the air growing heavier with every passing day. Her paranoia, once a distant thought in the back of her mind, now felt like a constant companion, a nagging voice telling her that something was wrong, telling her that she was in too deep. But then one evening, everything changed. It was late, well past midnight, when the phone rang. The sound of it cutting through the silence of the house was sharp and jarring, and for a brief moment, the mother froze, unable to move. She knew, instinctively, that this wasn't a call she wanted to take. She had been avoiding the phone for days now, ever since the last message that had threatened her. But as the ring persisted, her curiosity and dread pushed her to answer. "Hello." Her voice came out hoarse, her heart pounding in her ears as she pressed the phone to her ear. There was a long pause on the other end. The silence stretched on for a moment too long, and just as she was about to hang up, a voice finally broke through, cold and emotionless. "You need to stop looking.
Now."
The voice was muffled, as though it was coming from somewhere far away, but it was unmistakable. The threat was clear, and this time, it wasn't vague. "We know where you are, and we know who you care about. If you keep digging, if you keep pushing, you'll lose everything." The words were like a slap to her face, and for a moment, she could only stand there, stunned into silence. She wanted to argue, to fight back, to ask who was on the other end of the line, but before she could do anything, the call ended as abruptly as it had begun. The phone clicked in her hand, leaving her alone in the silence of the night, her heart pounding, her thoughts spinning in 1,000 different directions. This wasn't just a warning anymore. It was a declaration. Whoever was behind this, whoever had been orchestrating the threats and the manipulation, had taken their game to a terrifying new level. The urgency of the situation hit her all at once, crashing over her in waves. She wasn't just chasing a mystery now. She was a target. And the more she dug, The deeper she went, the more dangerous it became. She had underestimated the forces at play, assuming they were shadows in the background, hiding in plain sight. But now it was clear. They were watching her every move, anticipating her every step. And if she wasn't careful, if she didn't pull back, she would be walking straight into a trap. But it wasn't just the threats that made her stomach twist with dread. It was what happened next that sent her spiraling into a deep pit of fear. The next morning, as the sun barely rose, she went to check on her neighbor, a friend who had been supporting her throughout this ordeal. She had been talking to her about the case for weeks, and the two had been trying to piece together the puzzle together. But when the mother knocked on her door, there was no answer. She knocked again, harder this time, but the silence was deafening. A sense of unease crept over her as she turned the handle. To her shock, the door was unlocked, swinging open at the slightest touch. What she saw inside made her stomach churn. The house was eerily still. The lights were off, but the air felt heavy, as if something had been disturbed. Her friend's belongings were scattered around the house, as if she had left in a hurry, but there was no sign of her. No note, no explanation. It was as though she had vanished into thin air, just like her daughter. A cold knot formed in the mother's chest, and panic flooded her senses. Had her friend been taken? Or had she simply walked away? The thought was terrifying, but the more she looked around, the more it felt like something darker was at play. As she stood in the empty house, her phone buzzed again, a new message flashing across the screen. It was from the same unknown number that had sent the threats before. "You're not alone, but you will be if you keep digging." Her hand shook as she read the words, and the reality of the situation settled in with a crushing weight. Her friend was gone, and she was being hunted. The message was clear. There was no one she could trust anymore, no one who would help her unravel the truth. Everyone was either a target or a pawn in a game she couldn't comprehend. And with each passing hour, the stakes grew higher. In the days that followed, the paranoia began to consume her. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her, no matter where she went, no matter what she did. It felt as though every corner she turned, every step she took, she was being followed. And just when she thought she might be able to make sense of it all, another wrench was thrown into the works. A package arrived at her doorstep, a small, unmarked box with no return address. When she opened it, she found something that took her breath away, a photograph of her daughter, smiling, taken just before she had disappeared. But this wasn't just any photo. It was a picture of her daughter at the prom, the night she had vanished. But that wasn't the worst part. The photograph had been altered. In the background, barely visible, was a figure standing in the shadows, watching her daughter from a distance. The face was obscured, but the presence of the figure was unmistakable. Whoever had been watching her daughter that night, whoever had been involved in her disappearance, was still out there, still very much a part of this twisted puzzle. Her hands shook as she stared at the photo, a sense of dread seeping into her bones. She wasn't just being threatened anymore. She was being stalked, and the person responsible was closing in, piece by piece, trying to make sure that the truth would never see the light of day. The walls were closing in faster than she could keep up with, and the deeper she went, the more danger she faced. But one thing was certain: whoever was behind this would stop at nothing to make sure she never found the truth. And with every step she took toward uncovering what happened to her daughter, the more her world slipped into darkness.
Stay tuned.
The mystery is far from over, and the stakes have never been higher. Just when it seemed like the puzzle pieces were finally falling into place, a revelation surfaced that shattered everything the mother thought she knew. For weeks, she had been under the assumption that someone was behind her daughter's disappearance, that there was a dark force lurking in the shadows, pulling strings to keep the truth buried. But in a twisted turn of events, she realized that everything she had believed might have been a lie. It started innocently enough, with a phone call from the last person she expected to hear from. It was the sheriff, the man who had been helping her with the investigation, the man she had trusted more than anyone. His voice on the other end of the line was strained, uneasy, nothing like the calm, reassuring demeanor he had always presented. "We need to talk," he said, his words clipped. "It's about your daughter, and it's about the case. I need to meet you, but it has to be in person. Her heart skipped a beat. After everything, the thought of meeting him made her uneasy, but she agreed. She had no choice. She needed answers, and she needed them now. They agreed to meet in a quiet, secluded area, away from prying eyes. As she drove there, the unease in her chest grew heavier with each mile. Something about the situation felt off, but she couldn't quite place her finger on it. The sheriff had always been her ally, hadn't he? He had been the one who had held her together when it felt like everything was falling apart, the one who had promised to bring her daughter home. But as she arrived at the location, everything shifted. The sheriff was already there, standing by his patrol car, his back to her. He didn't turn around when she approached, and for a moment, she thought something was wrong. He didn't even acknowledge her presence. It was unlike him, almost as though he was trying to avoid her gaze. A pit formed in her stomach, the unsettling feeling growing stronger with each passing second. She called out to him, but still he didn't move. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he turned around. But this wasn't the man she knew. His face was drawn, pale, and there was something in his eyes, a deep, terrifying fear that sent a cold shiver down her spine. "I've been keeping something from you," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Something I should have told you a long time ago." She froze, her mind racing. What could he possibly have been hiding? The sheriff had always been transparent with her, hadn't he? He had been the one person who seemed unwavering in his commitment to finding the truth. But now, his words were dripping with guilt, and a sense of dread took root in her chest. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling, unable to mask the anxiety creeping into her tone. "The truth about your daughter's disappearance," he said, his eyes darting nervously around the area as though he feared someone was watching. "It's not what you think. I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but I can't keep lying to you anymore. You've been looking in the wrong places. The person who took your daughter is someone you know." The words hit her like a slap to the face, and for a moment, she couldn't breathe. What was he saying? She had suspected so many people, the strange figures, the shadows in the background, but she had never once considered that it could be someone close to her. Who could it be? The sheriff took a deep breath before continuing. "I never wanted to get involved, but I had no choice. I've been protecting you from the truth, from what I've uncovered. Your daughter wasn't taken by a stranger. It was someone in your circle, someone who's been close to you for a long time." Her mind reeled, trying to process the enormity of his words. She felt like the ground beneath her was shifting, like the entire foundation of everything she had believed in was crumbling away. Who? Who could have been involved in this, and why had the sheriff kept it from her for so long? The answer was just out of reach, taunting her. Then, with a heavy sigh, he leaned in closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. "It was your best friend. The one you've been confiding in. The one who's been helping you all along." The words were like a dagger to her heart. She stepped back, feeling her legs go weak beneath her. Her best friend? How could that be possible? She had been the one person who had supported her when everyone else turned away. She had been the one to comfort her in the darkest hours, the one who had stood by her side through it all. "I don't believe you," she managed to say, the words coming out in a strangled gasp. "You're lying. There's no way she—" But the sheriff cut her off, his voice heavy with regret. "I didn't want to believe it either, but I had to. I've seen the evidence. I've seen the connections. Your friend has been involved in things you don't understand. She's been playing both sides, feeding you information to keep you looking in the wrong direction, while she's been working with whoever was behind your daughter's disappearance all along." The weight of his words was suffocating. The person she had trusted most, the person who had been by her side every step of the way, had betrayed her in the most unimaginable way. The shock of it was enough to knock the wind out of her. But there was still more. There was something in the sheriff's eyes, something that told her this wasn't just a betrayal. It was something much darker. "You're in danger," the sheriff whispered, his voice trembling now. "She's been watching you. She's been planning everything. And now that you're close to the truth, she's going to do everything in her power to stop you." Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The strange behavior, the sudden disappearance of her friend, the odd encounters, and the cryptic messages, they had all been signs. She had been so focused on the external threats, so wrapped up in the mystery of her daughter's disappearance, that she had failed to see the person right in front of her, pulling the strings. With this new information, her entire world tilted on its axis. She had been chasing shadows when the real monster had been standing beside her the whole time. And now, as she looked back at the sheriff, she realized just how dangerous this situation had become. If her best friend was the one pulling the strings, if she had been working against her this whole time, then what else had she lied about? What other secrets were lurking beneath the surface, just waiting to come to light? The sheriff's final words echoed in her mind, a warning that she couldn't ignore. Get out of here. Leave town. You're not safe anymore. You're already in too deep. But as she turned to leave, a chilling thought crossed her mind. Was the sheriff really on her side, or was he just another pawn in this twisted game? And just as the thought entered her mind, she saw a shadow move in the distance, a figure emerging from the darkness. It was her best friend. But now she realized she didn't know her at all. Stay tuned. The truth is far more twisted than anyone could have imagined. The days that followed were a blur of confusion, terror, and relentless questioning. The sheriff's words echoed in the mother's mind like a constant drumbeat, growing louder and more insistent with each passing moment. Your best friend was involved. She couldn't fathom it, couldn't reconcile the person she had trusted with the dark reality the sheriff had exposed. Her best friend, the woman who had been her rock, the one she had turned to in her darkest moments, was now the very reason her world was unraveling. She had been lied to, manipulated, and now her daughter's disappearance had become a puzzle with even more pieces missing than she had imagined. But the hardest part was yet to come. She knew what she had to do, but the cost of doing it felt too high, too painful. Confronting her best friend, the woman who had held her together for so long, felt like a betrayal in itself. But could she really ignore the evidence, pretend that everything was still as it had been? Her instincts screamed at her to confront the truth, to demand answers, but every step toward that confrontation felt like she was walking into a trap. The phone call came late one evening, the same number she had seen on her screen before, the one that had haunted her for weeks now. This time, there was no mistaking it. This wasn't a threat. This was an ultimatum. You're too close, the voice on the other end of the line said, flat and emotionless, almost bored. We're giving you a choice. You stop looking into this, you stop digging, and we'll let you walk away. Your daughter's disappearance will remain a mystery, but you'll be safe. If you keep pushing, if you keep trying to find out what really happened, you'll lose everything. We'll make sure of it. She felt her breath catch in her throat as the words hit her. Lose everything? The implications were clear. Not just her safety, but the safety of everyone she loved. She thought about her son, the one person she had left in the world who was still an anchor for her in this spiraling chaos. He had been nothing but supportive, standing by her through the years of pain and grief. But what if she pushed too hard? What if her investigation put him in danger as well? Her mind raced. The very thought of walking away, of abandoning the search for the truth, felt like a betrayal to her daughter's memory. How could she stop now, after everything? But the weight of the choice crushed her. To pursue the truth meant risking her own life, and the lives of those she cared about. And yet, the idea of surrendering to whoever was behind this, of letting them control the narrative, was even worse. The decision didn't come easily. She spent hours pacing in her house, torn between the promise of safety and the gnawing need to know what had happened to her daughter. Each passing second felt like an eternity. She thought about the sheriff's warning, about the threats, about the way the puzzle pieces had been falling into place, only to be shattered with each new discovery. Could she really confront her best friend? Could she face the woman she thought she knew, the one who had been there for her through everything, and demand answers? Or was she walking into the hands of someone who had orchestrated this entire nightmare? And yet, no matter how hard she tried to silence the doubts, one thought persisted. She had to confront her. The truth, no matter how painful or dangerous, was the only thing that could set her free. But as she made her decision, the weight of it grew heavier still. She couldn't turn back. And now, she had to decide how far she was willing to go to uncover the truth. The next day, she called her best friend, the one person she had thought she could trust above all others. Her voice was steady, but there was a tremor of fear beneath the surface. "We need to talk," she said, her words clipped, cold, and final. "I know what you've been hiding. It's time for you to tell me the truth." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before her friend finally responded, her voice strangely calm, almost too calm. "You're making a mistake. You don't know what you're getting into." Her words held a warning, but there was something more to it, an edge to her voice that made the mother's blood run cold. The woman she had once considered a sister was no longer the person she thought she knew. There was a darkness in her tone, a flicker of something dangerous that she had never heard before. "I'm not making a mistake," the mother responded, her voice barely a whisper now. "You've been lying to me. You've been part of this all along. It's time for you to come clean." The silence that followed was thick with tension. For a moment, the mother thought her friend might hang up, might walk away from the confrontation altogether. But then, her friend's voice came through the phone, low and menacing. "You don't understand. You never did. I never wanted you to be involved in this. But now that you're here, now that you know too much, I have no choice." The words hung in the air, heavy and foreboding, and before the mother could react, her friend continued, "I don't want to hurt you, but you're already in danger. You and your son, you're both targets now. There's no way out of this. You need to choose, either you walk away from this investigation, or we'll make sure you and your family pay the price." The mother's mind spun with disbelief. How could this be happening? How had everything gone so horribly wrong? She had trusted her friend. She had shared her fears and her grief with her. But now, as the truth began to unfold before her, it was clear that she had been playing a dangerous game all along, manipulating her from the shadows. And now, her choices were more impossible than ever. She could walk away, as her friend had suggested, and live the rest of her life never knowing what happened to her daughter. She could protect herself and her son, burying the pain, locking away the questions that had haunted her for so long. But that meant giving up the chance for justice, for truth, for any hope of closure. And that felt like an unbearable price to pay. But if she chose to confront her friend, to push forward, to fight for the answers she so desperately needed, she knew she would be risking everything. Her safety, her son's safety, maybe even her life. There was no easy answer. There was no clear path forward. The stakes had never been higher, and the weight of the decision pressed down on her with an intensity that made it almost impossible to breathe. She was caught in a trap, facing a choice between the life she had known and the one she feared to discover. And as the phone call ended, the darkness in the air seemed to thicken, as though the world itself was waiting for her next move, holding its breath, watching, knowing that whatever she chose, there would be no going back. The truth was within her reach. But at what cost? The moment she hung up the phone, the mother felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins. The world around her seemed to shift, the weight of her choices pressing in from every side, and she knew that things were no longer just about her daughter. This had escalated far beyond that. The conspiracy, the lies, the manipulation, it was bigger than anything she could have imagined. She had thought this was about her family, about finding her daughter, and uncovering the truth. But now, she understood. She was just a pawn in a much darker game. Her best friend's threats lingered in her mind, but it wasn't just her anymore. She could feel eyes on her, watching her every move. People she had trusted, people she had relied on, were no longer what they seemed. As she began to piece together the fragments of the puzzle, something dawned on her. This wasn't just a personal vendetta. This was a coordinated effort, a web of deceit that reached far beyond the small town she thought she knew. The sheriff, the people who had promised to help her, the friends and allies she had leaned on, all of them had been lying to her in ways she never could have anticipated. She remembered the small, seemingly insignificant details that had nagged at her from the very beginning, the odd way certain people avoided answering her questions, the way information seemed to slip through her fingers every time she got too close. It was as if she had been led down a path, a carefully constructed trail designed to make her believe she was getting closer to the truth, while all along, she was being pulled further into a trap. She had suspected the sheriff, but even now, as the pieces came together, the enormity of the betrayal hit her like a ton of bricks. It wasn't just about the sheriff or her best friend, it was everyone. Everyone she had ever trusted was part of it. The more she dug, the more she realized the conspiracy ran deeper than she ever could have imagined. There were people she thought were friends, people she thought were allies, all of them complicit in the darkest corners of this twisted plan. Her own community was working against her, and it was clear now that they had been orchestrating this all along, pulling strings from the shadows. Her mind raced as she processed the new information. She had to act fast. The window of safety was closing, and she was beginning to realize that every second she hesitated, every moment she spent wondering who she could trust, was a moment the conspiracy used to tighten its grip on her. She needed to find her daughter, and she needed to expose the truth before it was too late. But the people who had been closest to her weren't going to let that happen. As she gathered what little information she had, trying to prepare herself for what was to come, a new threat emerged from the shadows. A person she thought she could trust had just revealed themselves to be an enemy in disguise. It was a trusted family member, someone who had been close to her daughter, someone who had been there all along, feeding her misinformation, playing both sides. Her heart dropped as she realized the full scope of the betrayal. How could she have missed it? How could she have been so blind? This person had been watching her every move, guiding her, and yet now it was clear. They had been playing a role in the conspiracy from the very beginning. Their motives weren't just about keeping her in the dark, they were about keeping her from the truth at all costs. This was no longer just about her daughter's disappearance. This was about the power of the people behind the scenes, the ones who had manipulated her every step, the ones who had controlled the narrative. Every connection she had made, every person she thought she could count on, had been a part of this web of lies. The stakes had just risen to a level she never thought possible. This wasn't just about finding her daughter anymore. It was about surviving the storm that was about to hit, and making sure she exposed the truth before it consumed her and everyone she cared about. But there was no time to plan, no time to prepare. She had no choice but to dive in headfirst. The clock was ticking, and as the conspiracy began to unravel at breakneck speed, the pressure of knowing how close she was to the truth grew unbearable. She had come this far, and she couldn't stop now. Even though she felt like the walls were closing in around her, even though she was surrounded by enemies, she pushed forward. She had no other choice. Every piece of the puzzle seemed to slip out of her grasp just as she was about to understand it. There were too many moving parts, too many people involved. She couldn't trust anyone. No one who had been part of this had a clean slate, not even the people she had once thought were on her side. She was caught in a vicious game, a game she hadn't chosen but had been forced into. The closer she got to the heart of it, the more dangerous it became. People were desperate to keep the truth hidden, and they would stop at nothing to ensure that it stayed buried. And then, as the pieces began to fall into place, as she reached the edge of discovery, the final blow came. She was on the verge of cracking it wide open, just one more step, one more lead, and then, without warning, it was all taken from her. A shocking betrayal, one she hadn't seen coming, tore everything apart. It was someone she had trusted completely, someone she thought would stand by her no matter what. But in a moment of devastating clarity, she saw them for who they truly were, a traitor, a puppet in the hands of those who had been pulling the strings all along. The truth was within her grasp, but now it was slipping away again, like sand through her fingers. She had been so close. But now, the danger was higher than ever. With each revelation, each betrayal, the stakes only grew. She had come too far to back down now. She couldn't stop. She wouldn't stop. Not when the truth was so close. But with the walls closing in, with time running out, one question loomed large in her mind. How much more was she willing to sacrifice to uncover the truth, and would it even be enough to save her in the end? The mother stood at the threshold of the abandoned warehouse, the air thick with tension, each breath she took heavy with the knowledge that this was it. The moment she had been racing toward, the point of no return. Everything had led to this confrontation, this final piece of the puzzle. The darkness of the warehouse stretched out before her, swallowing the faint glow of the streetlights. Every step she took echoed like a drumbeat, matching the pulse in her throat, the relentless pressure building inside her chest. She was close now, too close to stop. And yet, as she stepped into the shadows, something inside her felt like it was slipping away, as though she were walking toward something she couldn't come back from. Her mind kept racing through the events that had led her here. Her best friend's betrayal, the sheriff's complicity, the people she had trusted. Everything she thought she knew had been turned on its head. The web of lies had only expanded as the pieces of the conspiracy fell into place, each revelation more damning than the last. The feeling of being betrayed by those closest to her had been unbearable, but it paled in comparison to the final discovery, the truth about her daughter's disappearance. She had been right all along. It wasn't random. It wasn't just a freak accident. Her daughter had been part of something much darker, something far more insidious than she could have ever imagined. But now, it was time to face the mastermind behind it all. The villain who had pulled the strings, who had orchestrated this entire nightmare from the shadows, using everyone around her like puppets in a twisted game. It was her best friend, the one person who had been with her through every storm, who had known all of her weaknesses, all of her fears. The person who had seemed to stand by her side through every hardship was the very one who had pushed her toward this nightmare. And as she stepped further into the warehouse, there was no turning back. The door behind her slammed shut, and she spun around to face the dim light at the far end of the room. A figure stepped into view. Her best friend. But she wasn't the person she remembered. Gone was the comforting presence, the warmth, the reassurance. In her place stood a cold, calculating woman, a shadow of the friend she had once been. Her eyes were empty, hollow, a reflection of the person she had become. And as she spoke, the words that left her lips were not those of the woman who had comforted her during her darkest days. "You never should have come here," she said, her voice low and menacing. "You never should have dug this deep. You're in way over your head." The mother's heart raced, but she stood tall, her voice unwavering as she stepped closer. "It's over. I know everything. You won't get away with this." Her best friend's lips curled into a twisted smile, and for a moment, the mother was taken aback by the sheer malice that radiated from her. "You still don't get it, do you?" her friend sneered. "You never understood what was really at play here. This was never about your daughter. This was bigger than you, bigger than all of us. And now, because of your meddling, everything is falling apart." The mother's mind raced, trying to piece together the final fragments. What had she missed? What was the real motive behind everything? She had thought it was about revenge, about personal gain, but now, in the face of her best friend's cold demeanor, she knew it was something much more twisted. This was about power, control, and the manipulation of people like her, who had been blinded by trust and love. "You think you're the victim here?" her friend spat, stepping closer, the tension thickening in the air. "You've always been so naive, so caught up in your own pain that you never saw the bigger picture. I had to make sure you wouldn't uncover the truth, because the truth would destroy everything. You have no idea how deep this goes. You think it's just about your daughter?
No.
It's about something far bigger. A system. A conspiracy that goes all the way to the top." The mother's heart sank. The final piece fell into place. She had been right. Her daughter had been caught in the crossfire of a much larger, much darker plan. This wasn't just about a kidnapping. It wasn't even about the lies her friend had told her. This was a systematic manipulation, a carefully calculated operation that reached into the highest levels of power. Her daughter's disappearance was just a small part of a much greater game, a game played by people who saw her and her family as nothing more than pawns. And then it hit her. A single phrase from the past, the name that had been circling her mind for weeks, a name she hadn't been able to place. She hadn't understood why it felt so familiar. But now it was as if everything clicked into place. "The company," she whispered, almost to herself. "The one your husband worked for? He wasn't just a part of it, was he? He was leading it." Her best friend's expression changed in an instant. The mask of indifference faltered for the briefest second, and the mother saw the truth in her eyes. The truth that had been hidden all along. Her best friend had been playing a far more dangerous game than she had ever known. Her husband's mysterious involvement, her friend's cold distance, the strange things that never quite added up, they had all been leading here, to this moment. "I didn't have a choice," her friend hissed, a trace of desperation creeping into her voice. "You wouldn't understand. I had to do this. I had to protect myself. And now it's too late for you to back out. Too late for everyone." The mother's breath hitched as she finally understood. It wasn't just about the disappearance anymore. It was about the deeper conspiracy, the one her best friend had been wrapped up in for years. The same conspiracy that had led to her daughter's abduction. But there was one more thing her friend hadn't counted on. The mother had one last card to play. "I'm not the only one who knows, am I?" the mother asked, her voice now steady, resolute. Her hand reached into her pocket, pulling out the final piece of evidence she had managed to uncover. The hidden recording, the one that had been buried so deep she hadn't been able to access it until now. "You thought I wouldn't find this. You thought you could silence me. But I'm not alone in this anymore." Her best friend froze, her eyes widening as she realized what the mother had in her hand. The recording, a confession from someone within the conspiracy itself, was the one thing her friend had overlooked. And now, it was the very thing that would bring everything crashing down. For a moment, there was silence. And then, in a flash, everything exploded. The warehouse door burst open, and figures in black tactical gear flooded in, their weapons trained on both women. The mother's heart pounded in her chest as she realized what had just happened. The final twist, the one she hadn't seen coming, was that the conspiracy wasn't just about her daughter anymore. It wasn't even about her best friend. It was about something much bigger, a covert operation that reached beyond anyone's imagination, and it had been set in motion long before she ever entered the picture. The lights flickered, and the mother felt the world shift beneath her feet. In that moment, everything was uncertain. The walls of her reality were collapsing, and she realized that nothing, not even the truth, was ever as simple as it seemed. And as the figures closed in, she knew that her fight for survival and for justice had only just begun. In the aftermath of the raid, everything had changed. The warehouse, once the site of so many unanswered questions and buried secrets, was now a place of chaos and confusion, a shell of its former mystery. The figures in black had come for the people who had orchestrated the entire conspiracy, and they had come hard and fast. But as the dust settled, the mother found herself standing alone, her heart still pounding, her body numb with the weight of everything she had just been through. The recording she had found, the evidence that had brought everything to light, had been her ticket to not just surviving but finally understanding the true scope of the madness that had swallowed her family. Her daughter, once thought to be lost forever, had been found, though the reunion was anything but joyous. She was safe, yes, but broken in ways that words couldn't express. The truth about her abduction was far more harrowing than the mother could have imagined, and seeing her daughter again, after all the years of torment and unanswered questions, felt both like a blessing and a curse. There was a fragile sense of relief in the air, one that felt earned after so much pain, but it was tainted by the haunting reality of what her daughter had endured. As the mother sat by her daughter's side, trying to find the words to bridge the chasm of time and trauma between them, she couldn't help but feel the weight of everything they had both been through. The answers had come at a cost. The people she had trusted, the allies she had thought she could rely on, had all been part of a much larger game, and though some of them would pay the price for their betrayal, there would be no true justice in this world. The conspiracy had been too vast, too intricate, for anyone to be fully brought to justice. The truth about the corruption, the manipulation, the systems that had been in place for so long was still just too much for most people to grasp. But at least now, the mother knew her daughter was safe, that she could rebuild what was broken, even if the scars would never fully fade. The FBI had taken over the investigation, uncovering more details than the mother ever could have imagined. They had peeled back the layers of the conspiracy, exposing ties to corporate giants, political figures, and law enforcement officials who had been part of this operation. It was no longer just a local issue. It was a national one, a web of power and influence that had stretched across states, hiding in plain sight. And while some of the people responsible had been arrested, some had slipped through the cracks and others were buried so deep in the system that their involvement might never come to light. The mother had been told, repeatedly, that they had done all they could, but there were always pieces missing, always something left to question. But despite it all, despite the unanswered questions that would forever linger, there was a sense of closure, a fragile peace that began to settle in the mother's heart. She had fought for the truth, and though it had come at an unimaginable cost, she had gotten what she had set out to achieve. Her daughter was home. She had uncovered the conspiracy. She had taken down the people who had used her family as pawns in a much larger game. And she could finally breathe, knowing that the truth, no matter how ugly, was out there for the world to see. And yet, as the days passed, a gnawing feeling remained in the pit of her stomach. Something wasn't quite right. She could feel it, the weight of unfinished business, the lingering sense that the world she had stepped into wasn't done with her just yet. There were still whispers, rumors that hadn't been fully addressed, loose ends that hadn't been tied. The truth had been revealed, yes, but how much of it had been covered up? How much of it was still out there, waiting to be uncovered? One night, as she walked through the quiet house, her mind replaying everything that had happened, she found herself standing in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. She could see the woman she had become, a mother, yes, but also a warrior, a survivor. But beneath that, she knew that the truth was far from over. She had opened the door, but there was something on the other side, something she had only glimpsed at, that still held power over her. The feeling of being watched, of being followed, it hadn't gone away. There were eyes on her, always. And as she glanced out the window, the shadow of a figure standing at the edge of her yard caught her eye. For a moment, she froze. But when she looked again, the figure was gone, swallowed by the night. The unease lingered, a reminder that sometimes the past doesn't let go so easily, that the people who play these games never truly disappear. The conspiracy might have crumbled, but the world it had built still stood, its foundations still buried deep, hidden beneath the surface. The mother knew, deep down, that her fight was far from over. There were still secrets to uncover, still truths to be revealed. And as the world outside her window darkened, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, was waiting for her to come back, waiting for her to finish what she had started. But for now, she would rest. For now, she would hold her daughter close and try to find peace, try to rebuild what had been shattered. Because even in a world full of lies and manipulation, even when everything feels broken, there is always hope. There is always the chance to fight for what's right, to expose the darkness, and to find light in the most unexpected places. The journey wasn't over. It had just begun. And as the shadows of the past threatened to close in again, she knew that she was ready for whatever came next. But as the final scene played out in her mind, one question lingered, unanswered, hanging in the air. Who else was out there, waiting for the truth to come to light?